Hello, 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 and welcome to this last episode in the season of Return Feed, where we're taking a look at a few different contribution options just to see which one worked well, which one didn't work well. Over the last 4 or 5 weeks, we've been chatting about a bunch of different options, and today we just wanted to dig in and explore what we learned along the way. And we being me and Ryan, who's also here as well with me. Hello, Ryan.
G'day, John. How you doing?
I am doing well, thank you so much. Um, yeah, so it's been a fun few weeks just testing stuff out and exploring what kind of options that we wanted to try and use and go through. And I mean, I think I've used all of these in the past in some sense, but I've certainly never dug into them as deeply as we have on these episodes. Any episodes stand out in particular in your head right now, Ryan?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I've definitely learned a lot in these last few episodes. Yeah, being able to dive deep into them has been great. I mean, looking back to the Zoom episode, that certainly was a roller coaster for me, having to change things while we're live. So that was a bit of fun, but that also that wasn't Zoom's fault per se. That was a lack of testing, a lack of a lot of things. But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. I really enjoyed last week when we're talking about the streaming bridge, which I thought was going to be one of those ones where we're going, well, we can't really use it, so this might just be a little bit of a dud episode. But there was a lot of good conversation out of it, so I was pretty happy with how that turned out. How about you, John?
I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And I was really happy with how much time we chatted about a solution that we never really used much. It was quite cool just to see like what happens when something doesn't work. Can you actually talk much about it? And it turns out it actually makes for much more conversation. And especially for that one in general, where we did lots of testing and trying to overcome the issues that we were having. It was really interesting to try really hard to overcome that. So it did turn into be lots of different. We tried this, we tried that, and it didn't work. And yeah, it was quite cool. But I just wanted before I go any further, just say hello to some of the usual crew who's watching along. Jeremy here, member of the channel, watching from Sydney, and Justin as well here, Sydney gang representing. Very
Woohoo!
nice. Go Sydney, Ryan says. Um, yeah, a lot of familiar faces, a couple of new ones as well, which is always nice to see. But nice to see you all here. Be sure to throw any questions that you have in the chat and be try to include at here to record on those as well, so it shows up really big on my screen and I can see it really clearly. But otherwise, we'll tuck in as we go along and answer questions along the way of what people thought. I also put a poll in the chat of what is your preferred contribution method, so be sure to vote on that as well. And maybe we'll look at that a bit later in the show to see what people preferred to be their contribution method of choice. So Ryan, give us a little bit of background on what equipment you have on your end that was sort of deciding what solutions we would explore in the season.
Yeah, so quick rundown. So I running an 810 Mini Extreme as my vision switcher. I've got so typically I've been using a laptop or a Raspberry Pi to get the contributor methods into the switcher itself. I'm running a Behringer X-Air XR16, Air XR16 as my audio mixer. So all my audio is running through the mixer itself. So I can do the mix minus to everyone. And then I'm running a audio interface on my contributor machine, so I can send them a mix minus, and so we can talk in the countdown and do things like that. So that's a very basic rundown of that equipment side on how we've been doing that.
Yeah, nice. And I think I'm back up and running here. Yeah, I lost access on my iPad for a second, but we're back and showing some chat. So Jeremy wants to know which one of these options are we using today for the stream, Ryan? Which one?
Should we put a poll there and see if people can guess? Or
It's a good idea. We're gonna overload with polls.
so today we're using Video Ninja. So that seems to be the one that, yeah, it just seemed easy to do, and it worked for us every time so far. So but we'll talk about preferences and stuff later on. So we'll see how we go.
Exactly, but you're right. It was the most successful, so we stuck with it. Let's see. Jimboko says no sun in Sweden or Australia. Where is it? Yeah, exactly. Sort of somewhere,
It's definitely not here, that's for sure.
somewhere else, somewhere in between, I think. And Talalak says awesome series, lots of great info and food for thought. That's good to hear. Um, I think what we wanted to strike a balance between was like information overload and nuggets of information along the way. But I think overall, what ended up happening is that you just get to see it being used live or almost live in terms of the ATEM streaming bridge. And from that comes interesting thoughts on how well these work, especially with you being on the other side of the planet, Ryan. We could see if there's any weird things that happened whenever you live so far away from each other, and if you were going to bring a guest into your own show or your own production. If it works over this extended distance on my 4G, and I mean, Ryan, I think it's fair to say Australia is not necessarily known for its amazing internet. And so
Can
if
confirm.
it works
Can
for
confirm.
us, you can confirm. Good. I realized when I started saying that, I was like, is this, is this true? But
No, no,
I
it's
believe
true.
I've heard
Yeah, no,
enough
it's
people, yeah,
100%
it's
true.
true. Enough people said that. Good. So if it works for us, then, it should work for you. That's for sure. And somebody else, I just wanted to point it out there that said, oh, I missed it. Oh, yeah, here. Ryland said, I managed each episode live. Appreciate it, guys. So that's cool. I'm glad you made it to each of the episodes live and watched us as we explored things and yeah, figured some stuff out live. That's for sure. But like I said, if there's questions, I see some stuff coming in already, so we can definitely circle back to questions a little bit later. What we thought we would do, instead of basically talking about each episode or each contribution method individually, we would go through the sort of rating system that we set up in the first episode, and then we could just talk to pros or cons of certain solutions within that rating area. So the first one that we decided on a while back was the contributor experience. Now, I don't think, Ryan, you can speak too much to this since you were on the receiving end of all these feeds. But for me, certainly, as a contributor, saying that weird, I think that the Video.Ninja and the Zoom solutions were definitely the ones that just felt very comfortable for me as a, get a link from somebody, click on that link, and it basically works. I can't really imagine how easy it would be for your average contributor to use or maybe even have to troubleshoot like an SRT encoder or something like that. So based on and certainly on the ATEM mini streaming bridge side of things too, if some issues happened, that would be quite hard for them to really figure out. But for us as contributors along the way, I think video and Zoom are very comfortable tools to just log into and use. But I guess, Ryan, it's fair to say you've used these tools in the past, so maybe you have some contribution experience along the way.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. Like you say, it's if you're talking about like SRT or streaming bridge, you, ideally you want to be setting it up before you send it to the client because there's a lot that can go wrong and a lot that you want to tweak beforehand. For me, it's a tough one. So I think also in contributor experience, but there's also another rating down talking about the next one's actually networks, which will be another point to talk about. But with one thing I do like about video is that once they're in the system, you can do whatever you want with them essentially. So once they've got a link, you can move them between rooms. You can do a whole bunch of stuff really easily. Change their format, their resolution. Do a whole bunch of stuff. You can send them new links. Again, once they're in, they're in. You can do similar with Zoom. You can put breakouts and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's you're a little bit more limited in terms of that. Video Ninja, you can also add things like clicker. You can add that to the thing. You can restrict what they're seeing. You can change the resolution that they're seeing and a whole bunch of different things. So you have a lot more control about what they experience. But at the same time, that can also be a downside as well because they might be used to Zoom, for example, and go, well, this is what I normally do, but trying to make that work for them can be an interesting part. Doing SRT or streaming bridge, that can get some better quality, but at the same time, you will have to set up a back channel of sorts as well. So it's going to be two devices potentially, and all that kind of stuff. So a bit more advanced, but you also get the better quality as well. So that's where the trade-off happens between those two, or those four really.
You're right. And funny you should say that. Morton here came in with a question, which was, which one of these methods does not require a separate back channel? And that is the case for Zoom and obviously, and Video.Ninja as well. They're already basically the back channel. In fact, Video.Ninja was the back channel for the other options that we used that didn't have a back channel built in. And so when we're speaking here about contributor experience, telling the contributor that there is only one link that you have to click on, and don't you have to worry. For example, if you were giving them an SRT encoder and then a back channel through something else, there is 2 steps there, and they might be a little bit like, oh, but should I be over here doing this? Should I be here doing that? So the Video.Ninja especially being and working so well for us, it being the back channel as well is really interesting from a contributor experience point of view, because once you're launched up, connected to that, and it's working as you expect it, then you can just sit in there and listen to the show and be a part of the show. So I think that was a very timely question there, Morton, and I think it fits into that topic pretty well. I think that's pretty good on contributor experience. I think we can switch to our next section, which was how well it would traverse networks or complex setups. But based on our 2 networks, Ryan, I don't know if it really, any of the options really had to do too much. Would that be fair in saying?
Yeah, correct. I mean, since we're both on home connections, we can control our firewalls and all that kind of stuff. So I think this question comes more into if we're talking about enterprise networks, I've had to fight with a lot.
Right.
So, which sadly will essentially mean that Video Ninja is gone. So as soon as we're talking about doing a, if I'm doing a gig and I to bring someone in, one of my first questions are where are the people coming from? Are they coming from home? Are they coming from their office? And essentially, if the answer's from their office, sadly, I pretty much automatically veto Video Ninja, because we're not going to get time to mess with the network. IT department's not going to be bothered. So really that leaves it down to Zoom / SRT. Yeah, basically that's really what it comes down to is whatever's open on the network. And even some places might not even allow Zoom to work as well.
I think that's one of those cases where having a secondary solution ready to go is super important. And sometimes, annoyingly, you have to kind of, the secondary solution might end up being whatever that company uses internally. For example, I've done gigs in the past where we wanted to use vMix Call for them, but the networks were just not having it. So we had to backtrack to Teams, because that's what the organization, in this case, a public organization, they were using that. So they had all the right credentials in place for that to work. And as much as you might not want to have to use that, then that's the one that made sense. So yeah, it's a tricky one, this topic, because your best solution might not work when you get there on site, for example, and you just have to scratch that and head over to a backup instead. So yeah, that's one of those ones. It's, if everything works out in your best case scenario, then that's great. But then you get there and it doesn't work. So tricky one.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Having a backup of on site is definitely crucial, because
I think so.
You will find that one day. And sorry about the sync issues. That's a bit weird. I'm just noticing that coming up in the chat. I haven't changed anything, so maybe the Australian internet we were complaining about has caught up on us. And
yeah, we'll see. It looks like it might have been a YouTube issue, because I was watching it a little bit here and it seemed just fine. But we'll see. Latency is our next topic. What about latency? Because for SRT, you get to kind of choose, which makes it very useful. In fact, if you watched the show this past weekend here on this channel, we used SRT with a 5-second latency to do our show, so that the real-time discussion was happening in Zoom, and then 5 seconds later, the team was cutting that in vMix. And what that meant was they knew what was going to come into the production, and they could decide who to cut to. But for our case, Ryan, you're not going to be able to run a production and be part of the production with that kind of delay. In fact, even with a 1 or 2 second delay, to get a good quality from me and from was it Jonas was on that SRT? Yeah, it was. Then you being a part of the production, really, we can't have that high delay, right? Or latency.
Yeah. So because you were coming into my studio and I was real time and you weren't, because SRT will typically have at least 1 second on average, as in terms of a lowest um, buffer on there. So yeah, so like you said in your episode, you were talking about, yeah, you had 5 seconds coming in, which is great because you have plenty of time for the network to recover for any reason, but you were all coming in at the same time. So that's where that comes in handy. So that when you're time, yeah, as long as you're talking on that back channel at low latency, that's all fine. And you're coming in at the same time, it can be 10 minutes. It doesn't really matter as long as you can still communicate at a fast speed. So yeah, I guess SRT and Streaming Bridge both have around a second. Let's call it that. So yeah, if you're bringing that in, that is going to be potentially an issue, or at least something you have to consider when you're communicating. So I had to make sure I had to make sure I was listening to the feed coming in so that I didn't talk over anyone. So it did mean there was a long gap between when I stopped talking and when you started talking.
Right.
But it meant that no one talked over each other. So that's probably the only way of doing that without, yeah, stepping on each other's toes, really.
And it was super funny when we did some testing of the Speedify 810 streaming bridge stuff that we thought, yeah, this could totally work. And then you watch it, we watched back some tests, and you were answering questions before Alex was asking those questions to you, which was just a real mind trip to
Because you
watch
got up to
back.
5 seconds, I think, and that was
Yeah, it did.
crazy.
5 seconds is enormous amount of time. Like obviously it's unusable, but um just to watch that back was really funny to see. Like you were like, yeah, 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 and he's like, so what do you think of this? It just, but again, if I know that a lot of people watching this series are actually just on the production team and they're just looking for good solutions to use. So therefore, it's not so concerning to put everybody on a delay, even up to a couple of seconds. It's all pretty usable because you're not also trying to pipe into the conversation and say your 2 cents on that. So it is a bit of a strange use case to be part of the show and using the solutions. But at least if you're watching along and you wanted to try some of this stuff to bring a guest into your stream, I mean, that's something I do here on the channel a lot. Then it helps me to know which of these solutions works best for my internet and which ones will definitely not work for me as a host, but also a participant as well. So, you know, latency is a funny one. It can either be terrible for your show or not too bad for your show. Yep. All right, let's keep going before I jump into any questions. We'll go to this next one here. Quality of the delivered video. So, do we have any highlights or any not so highlights on that one?
I mean, I think it's pretty simple, that one. It's basically SRT, Streaming Bridge, video, Zoom. And Zoom is also variable in terms of what account you have. So if you've got 360, well, I mean, that's just don't bother. But I mean, 720 is when it gets usable and 1080 is great, but then you have to get those credentials to make that work. But I mean, that's really what I can see in terms of the quality there. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think so. I think SRT definitely is high. With I guess like we talked about the latency before being the sort of trade-off that you have to or you ought to go by to get that good quality coming at you. Um, and here's Rich just happened to say, which was pretty topical, SRT delay is annoying as a talent. SRT delay is annoying as the talent if they're feeding the program back to you. Exactly. So that was the problem that we had this weekend on the stream, is that we didn't bring in the program feedback to us because it would have been 5 seconds delayed. So we decided to skip that, or I decided to skip that. But what I realized in the end is, since we were all pretty technical people in that call, even that 5 second delay would have been better than nothing for us. But I would never have given that to like the average contributor because they potentially would have got very confused. And seeing yourself in there is hard enough. Never mind seeing yourself but 5 seconds ago. It can be very distracting. So in that case, when you get that really good video quality out of the SRT, the trade-off can be the delay gets pretty high. But I think when I watched some stuff back afterwards, the ATEM streaming bridge stuff it does look really good. Like the clean signal, the ease of use with the ATEM setups that we were using. So the quality of the delivered video is really good. Aside from the issues that we had going from here to you, certainly we've used it in other videos in the past. So, and I believe you have as well, Ryan, right? So the quality of that video ends up being totally worth it when it works,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, and depending on your bandwidth, you can crank it right up. So if you've got a great connection, you can go all the way to 90 megabit and just you won't notice a difference at all. So
Just watch.
just watch my internet
Exactly.
cry. Yeah.
Just make sure there's no particular questions on that topic before we head over to some more. Here's an off-topic question. Why don't we just cover this right now? Ryan Summerfield, your lighting is always great. Please describe hair light, height, and angle. Go on. Can you give us that?
I haven't got my Apple TV hooked up, but basically I've just got a 1 by 1 foot panel, which is sitting up there, which is my key light. And I've got 3 screens here, which is kind of a little bit of fill. But in terms of my backlight, I've got 3 lights above me. 2 of them are just facing into the roof because I don't want to be lighting up the background. And then it's angle-wise, it's basically that kind of angle from me. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. But yeah, it's just the light that I had in the roof. It happens to be daylight-ish, and I'm running a little bit more tungsten out of the key light there. So yeah, simple, but it works.
Yeah, it does look really good. So I thought that was worth exploring before we went any further. But before
Got
we
my
finish on
headphones
the
again.
quality of delivered video, I can see you fixing yourself there. Before we finish on that, I think it's worth mentioning that whenever you get 1080p out of Zoom, it actually looks really good. So if you get that account, I think it's the business account you really need. Even 720p looks pretty good, but when you get that 1080p signal out of Zoom, it does look really good. And I think whenever you've used Zoom for a while and you've gotten pretty used to 360p in there, that bump up to 1080p is surprisingly good quality. It can be in around 5 or 6 megs per second, so it's very usable. So even though, we really would prefer the SRT ATEM streaming bridge for like really good quality and dial in the quality, whenever things work in Zoom particularly, then you can actually get something really good and have that as your back channel as well. It's totally worth it.
Yeah, and I've made it a normal part of gigs now. Whenever I'm using Zoom, I basically go where I'm just chucking in a Zoom room and just have a machine there just to join the call, bump up to 720, and then we're done. So that's just a standard practice now. So for 50 US or whatever it is per month, it's a worthwhile thing. That extra quality just makes a huge difference. So that's a free hack on, well, not a free, but a $50 hack on that one.
Yeah, not so free hack on that one. I think that brings us on nicely actually to the adjustability of signal. So I think there's 2 sides to this one. One side is the Zoom video side, which while there are some flags in video.ninja, those 2 I would put in the same category because they are pushing back at the network and sort of demanding what you can send. Whereas I would put the other 2, SRT and ATEM streaming bridge, on the other side, which is you really just set what quality you want to send and just push that. And for me on this internet at home here, I actually feel much more comfortable on the video.ninja or the Zoom side of the scale because I know that it fluctuates a lot as I go through meetings and things like that and Zoom calls, and I can just kind of trust it to do some of the work for me and I don't have to be worried about am I sending too much signal out. Whereas when it comes to the production side of things, and if you have a decent enough connection, it's actually quite nice to be on the other side of that, which is pushing a stream out and setting a fixed latency and quality, and then just letting it do its thing. But I wonder on your side, Ryan, receiving these signals, have you found either one to be the preferred way that you like to get a signal in?
It's a good question. I do. It is nice to have the control. Um, so, which I guess you have control over video streaming bridge and um, SRT. Well, as long as it's set right in the first place. Hey, it's me. Um, and yeah, so that's one thing I did like about video. So before video was really a thing, I went back and so I was using Livestream Studio, even vMix Call, and what was the other one? There was another one which someone suggested, which was Live to Air as well, and those are all very similar to Video Ninja, but they don't have any options in terms of changing the compression, the resolution, anything like that. It's a out of the box thing, so it will just send. But we were finding that people were jumping on Wi-Fi and then having a whole bunch of stutters and rainbow puke going on when they were sending us their feed. So if we're talking about WebRTC, having the ability to change the codec per person depending on what their machine is, their internet's like, is amazing. Because we've had some things where we're just gone, VP9 is just not working, or let's move to VP8 or move to H.264 or AV1, depending on all these different things. So when you've got people who are problematic on their side, being able to fine tune on that is massive. But if you've got people with a decent connection all around, you can kind of go, yeah, most of them will work. That's no problem. But having that option is, yeah, that's definitely a huge part.
It is, yeah. So there's two back-to-back sections or rating sections now: software production integration and hardware production integration. And I think I can talk some about the software stuff, and then since you have the hardware in your end, Ryan, we'll get to you in a second. But many of these, so if I'm thinking about software production integration, the one I use most is probably vMix. So I could just talk to that, and I would really like to explore that in a future season or episodes of this show. But how well these things work with something like vMix is actually pretty nice across the board. So you can do like a screen scrape of a Zoom call, or you can use NDI out of Zoom into vMix. You could do a screen scrape in video.ninja as well, or you could use SRT into vMix. I guess the only one that doesn't really make sense in this case is the streaming bridge, since it's like a receiving device, and it wouldn't really make much sense. I guess you could go ATEM mini to the streaming bridge and then like SDI out of the streaming bridge into vMix to capture, but that would be an odd step, I would say.
Can
But in terms of
vMix
how
receive
well,
a RTMP feed?
I don't think so, but someone can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. But I have a feeling that you can't receive that without something in between the two,
Okay.
unless I haven't actually find that option somewhere. But I think I tried to do that once and it didn't go so well, and I can't remember the exact details. But
Interesting.
so in theory, then you could just go ATEM to vMix. But so in terms of software production integration, actually the options are pretty nicely working well there. And of course, you could use something like vMix Call, which is built in and really purpose built for that sort of setup. I find in my testing in the past that Zoom, for example, or maybe even video, the latency is much lower and therefore conversation flows a lot easier than with something like vMix Call, but something we could try definitely in the future. So when it comes to the software integration, you're pretty good across the board, I think, in general. And I'm interested, Ryan, from you to hear in terms of the hardware integration, if it's the same idea. What do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Like you say, I think the software is easier all round, especially because it's coming from a computer or device of some sort going over the internet. So you don't have to physically get it into a cable to then plug it into a system. So a lot of the time software is easier, and I've got a job coming up in a couple of weeks where we've got 16 guests having to come in, and we're trying to figure out, and we've got a hosting position as well, so we're trying to figure out how to do that. Oh, and it's also vertical because it's going to TikTok. So, I,
Of
I've
course
got a
it is.
lot of testing to do to figure that out. But in terms of hardware, it has been an interesting one because each week has been slightly different in a way. Now, actually, today I'm picking up a Decklink Duo card, which would have been great maybe 5 weeks ago. Just saw one pop up on Facebook, so I'm like, that's it. I'm just going to buy one because I'm getting sick of having to use HDMI and all that kind of stuff. Speaking of HDMI, that was an interesting one where, so most of the time I was running my laptop and running HDMI out into my switcher, and the color shift coming out of the HDMI on the laptop was a bit problematic, especially when we were talking about, I think, Video Ninja. We had I had the wrong color profile on my output, so that was a big part. In terms of hardware integration, what I'm really wanting at the moment is a browser source to SDI software, just a software from a browser source to Blackmagic SDI or HDMI, well, just the Decklink basically. So that's really what I'm needing, because a lot of the time I'm using OBS to send from a browser source out to that. So looking for just a very simple browser thing going out. And there was one that popped up on Windows, but there was an issue with audio, but they've been working on that on the back end. It is an interesting one. A lot of the time, there is definitely hardware to do things. So SRT, you can get SRT decoders. Obviously, the streaming bridge will just go straight in HDMI or SDI. But it's when you're working with things like Zoom and Video Ninja, that's where things get difficult, because you do have to convert it to a physical cable. So for me, I like to try and do things on a Decklink card of some sort, just so you get the correct color, audio is embedded easily, and you don't ever have your mouse going on top of the screen and stuff like that. So that's definitely a preference, but it's figuring out how to get that from Zoom or video. That's where things get interesting. So definitely things to look into in the future, that's for sure.
And I think us doing this week by week, you get to see all these little quirks and you get to remember them as we go along. Because previous to this, I mean, I haven't done too many gigs out and about in a while, but I used to do loads of them. But all of these contribution methods would be spread out enough that you would kind of forget some of the quirks of the previous one before you went on to use something else instead. So this weekly series has actually really brought attention to some of those things. For example, last week it didn't look like that. Why does my camera look so different this week when everything's the same? And then you start to boil it down to maybe it's the HDMI output here, or maybe it's that. So that's quite interesting to have this format and then learn as we go. One of our early ideas for this format actually was to do one episode per day for like 7 days in a row or 6 days in a row. So we'd really see side by side, or well, side by side ish, how well these things work. But I must admit, Ryan, I'm glad we didn't push ourselves that hard on this season.
I would have died. That would not have been fun. Do we
Exactly.
need to put the timer up? What are we at today? It's 4:30, so it's not too bad at the moment.
It's fine. Whenever we start the show, and I used to show at the start of the show, I totally forgot today. It always seems so early, but now, 4:30, not so bad.
It's easy.
All right. Before we go on more rating stuff, I just wanted to go into Q&A because we had some stuff stacking here, and I don't want to miss anything along the way, or just random comments as well were really useful. Joel says it should be an interesting episode to see the final take on a good, easy to use solution for remote guests. And I think hopefully our summation does a good job of that, because I don't think we were ever going to give you like the perfect solution at the end, but I think as we go through all these, you'll remember some of the pros and cons along the way, definitely.
Yeah, we were talking at the beginning and going, so what's the winner per se? But I don't think there is, because
No,
every
I don't think so.
situation will determine what you're doing, and that's where pre-production comes in handy. Like, you really need to focus on where are the people coming from, what's our end goal, what's more priority, latency or quality. There's so many factors, and So I have my preference of what I'll go to if I have the option, but it doesn't work for every option. So yeah, there really is almost needs to be like a sheet of like, if this, then do this, or if that, then do that. And
Exactly. Yeah. We need like a flow diagram
yeah.
of some sort.
In
Yeah, and to
H2R
that point, like
beer, maybe or something.
exactly. I'll just make another app. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, do it. Yeah.
No, but to that point, you're absolutely right. And I think it like I'm really used to using Zoom for these kind of things. That's my go-to option, and then SRT. But having explored video so much during these calls between you and me, just testing, and then during the shows, I'm much more confident now that I could actually use that for shows and stuff. So you do learn along the way. I wanted to show up this next. I guess it's not a question, just a nice comment from HP Digital. Hi, Amanda from South Africa. Totally enjoyed the series. Also started using video.ninja. Thank you for all the great tips and great information. Thank you so much. I appreciate that a lot. And here we have a question or a comment again from Sergio. I hope I'm saying that pretty well. Hello from Romania. Thank you for doing all this live shows. I learned so much from you. Excellent. A lot of nice comments. I didn't mean to stack up all these compliments here. I thought these were all questions when I was tapping on them there. And one more nice comment from Rick here. I'm very much appreciated the series. An important topic with so many options to explore. Not all equally great. You're absolutely right. Okay, I'm going to go to a question now instead of just, all these compliments and pats on the back. Hardy Media says, any thoughts on Zoom ISO? Now, I must say I'm pretty intrigued by it, but I don't think currently I really have the hardware to pull off something like that. But Ryan, have you been tinkering with Zoom ISO at all?
When it first came into beta, I downloaded it and gave it a shot, and it crashed a lot. But that also, my machine is fairly buggy when it comes to that. So I do want to try it more. It's something that I'm quite interested in because it should do a lot of the things that we want to do. But from what I'm looking at, it seems to be basically doing a software screen grab of Zoom essentially. But for me, since Zoom Rooms came out with NDI, I don't know if I would actually use that because NDI will basically be a guaranteed clean feed and you get the isolated audio as well. So for me, those are the two things that I really want from a Zoom output. And it's annoying having to use Zoom Rooms and you get 3 per machine. But then again, you're also giving your computer the best option. So, it's 3 per machine rather than 1 per machine. And trying to get that into SDI is a little bit annoying. But, NDI to SDI is a fairly easy conversion in terms of software. So, that's currently my preference, but I do need to play more with it to see what it can give me in terms of, full productions.
Exactly. And I think it's totally worth exploring that in a future episode or something once we get it running a bit better. Like I said, I didn't really have the computing power either to even dig into it at all, but I'm really interested to see how it continues. And Andy, one of the developers on that, is part of the Discord community in there as well. So I know that I'm sure if we reached out to him with any questions or issues along the way, he'd be happy to help us along. And then could even explore that in the future as well. So that would be super cool to have some more details on and some thoughts on how it differs from Zoom NDI, because I'm sure it does. We're maybe just not thinking about those exact differences right now. Go Web Technologies, great question here with a bad answer. Do you have a backup for your setup today? If so, what? The answer is no, we do not. So there's never any backup in this show. I think I would totally run a backup, but my internet lets me run one good quality signal out of here. And as you might have saw in last week's ATEM Streaming Bridge episode, once I started pushing a second feed out of the house to Alex's Streaming Bridge, video just fell apart. So there's no backup on these streams. Maybe someday.
That actually is a good point though, because for me, redundancy is a huge part, especially working on larger gigs where it just can't go wrong. When I'm working on larger gigs, basically we have 2 transmitters at all times. So we have one on 4G, one on fiber, depending on the building. So redundancy is a huge part. So that's one thing I do like about VDO well, actually, we can go through all of them. So Zoom, you can have redundancy in terms of having a receiving on 2 internet connections for example. So if one goes down or one machine goes down, you can flick to the other one. Audio gets a bit fun because you need to have a single audio going into Zoom. Actually, I guess it's the same for all of them. But yeah, having that on 2 feeds. Video, I typically have receiving on 2 feeds, but having it going peer to peer, you're putting a bit more strain on everyone's connection because it's just more points that's going around. SRT, I don't think you can run just 2 different connections. And Streaming Bridge is also single as well, unless you go through a restream. So in terms of redundancy, you don't really have that option in terms of dual receivers. Obviously, if the transmitter dies on either of these options, then you lost it as well. But yeah, I don't want to be the one going, oh, we didn't have a backup on our end. If their end dies, you can blame them, but we don't want it to be our fault. So.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And a backup is something I often push for many gigs that I've done. So certainly whenever I'm doing something, um, I mean, like I said, if I had the bandwidth here, we probably would end up just running a backup of something anyway for the show because we want this to work. You know, I was about to say if I'm doing something more serious, but I want the stream to work and not crumble apart. It's just that, like, I was trying to at one point when I put my phone next to the window, I would get a pretty good 4G signal on that. So I was thinking last week that I could connect my web presenters to that and just get a backup going from that to the streaming bridge, but for some reason I've lost that signal as well. So yeah, the 4G internet just doesn't like where I'm situated, but it's totally worth it to be here. MT wants to know, is it possible to get a Teams call into Video Ninja? I don't know about that. Do you know anything about that, Ryan?
I guess if you were to do that, you would basically do a screen grab and then pipe it in. Although Teams has NDI out,
Correct.
Yeah, so I guess you could put Teams into OBS, for example, and then output that into virtual webcam into Video Ninja. Because basically video just accepts a webcam feed. So whether that's a virtual NDI, a virtual webcam, virtual anything, or a physical cable, if you can get it as a webcam on your computer, it can go into video. So that's really what that comes down to.
I guess I would wonder what was the use case. Just like how far do you want to push that would be the question, and what you're trying to achieve. But it sounds like there may be a way to make it happen. We have another question here. Black Mutt Video says, not directly related, but would love to know how you are mitigating room echo in a small space. Tons of sound dampening, question mark. Great mic, audio processing. In this case today, I haven't really done anything around the house to dampen sounds, not on purpose. There's lots of surfaces looking right at me, so I haven't really done anything for that. Usually whenever I'm doing my live streams, I run it through the ATEM and try to pull as much of the background stuff out of it as possible. But today I'm using things a little bit differently, and Ryan, you're doing some stuff on your end for my mic, right?
Yeah, I'm doing the unthinkable. I've always been a never put a gate on a vocal, but I've actually started doing that because I've got my laptop catching fire over here and my rack's also cranking away. So I am running gates on both of our feeds actually. So, I mean, this room's actually quite nice because it's wooden rooms, angled roof and carpeted floor. So it's actually not bad. There's just a lot of fan noise from my equipment. So, but yeah, I'm running gates on both of us and it's not too bad. Actually, expanded more than gates. So yeah.
It sounds pretty good. So that's a good question. I'm happy to hear that it sounds pretty good. Excellent. Question here from Urban Media Showcase. Have you ever used Sierra Monitor with the Apple TV to convert to HDMI? I use it with vMix to my extreme ISO. BirdDog is coming out with a cheaper solution called the BirdDog Play. So I can't speak to the BirdDog Play. Well, I can only kind of speak to it. I asked, could I get one of those whenever they come out? So I'm waiting to see when they come out. But it's just like a tiny little Apple TV style box that you plug into your TV and you can receive SDI on it, right?
HDMI.
No, I'm blanking. Oh, it's got HDMI, but it receives. Does it receive an SRT feed or an NDI feed?
I think it's just does it do a sub?
It's just maybe it's just NDI. Maybe,
I
yeah.
am actually quite excited
It's
about that box. I'm
yeah,
definitely
me
keen
too.
for that
Me
to
too.
come out. Yeah.
NDI, Mikhail says in the chat. So yeah, I'm excited for that. But as for the Sierra monitor, I have no experience with Sierra at all. Maybe Ryan, I'm going to guess that you don't either. Correct?
I did consider it. So I've got a Apple
Ah,
TV 3 in my rack, and I was
mhm.
thinking of getting the 4 so I could do Stereo monitor, but then I was looking at the price going, well, it's $250 for the Apple TV, then it's another $100 for the software, so and then the the Bird Dog Play is $200. So I'm like, well, I can get two of them for the price of a unofficial supported thing, which might crash or do whatever. So then again, I mean, the Bird Dog Play's not out yet, and we don't know if it even works. So yeah, we'll see. So yeah, I'm basically waiting out for the Bird Dog Play and see how that goes. That's really what it comes
Yeah,
down to.
same. I think once I get one of those, then I'll have a play with it and see how well it goes. But before we move away from the Q&A section, I did want to ask if you're watching along here, and if there is a season 2 of Return Feed, which I know Ryan and I are quite excited to make happen for sure. But we would love to hear in the chat right now or in the comments below if you're watching on demand what you think we should cover in that. So just put the name of a service in there. I see some things already in there. Um, People are already looking forward to season 2, suggesting some things. So just throw them in the chat right now, and we can review them either at the end of the stream or in time. I'd love to hear. Someone's already saying Ecamm, so things like that. Just throw it in there, and we'll definitely come back to it and explore it in the future. I think we're just going to go for one or two more of these rating systems, but I think it's totally worth, Ryan, talking a little bit about audio quality for each of the solutions and which one on the receiving end you thought the quality sounded the best for.
That's a loaded question because I've noticed a lot of people talking about, because there's two parts to audio quality. One is, do we just get 48K audio from the source, and it's because it's not necessarily about getting the best audio in terms of quality, but it's also it's about getting the best audio. So you may have some people on noisy connection, noisy laptop, background noise. So you may actually want to have that noise canceling coming in. Um, for John and I, we're on controlled environments and we have decent microphones. So I turn off all the audio processing on the feeds coming in for these. But for most people, just on a laptop, actually having the noise cancellation from Zoom, for example, is actually a good one. So if it's kind of backwards. So if you've got a bad audio, Zoom is probably your best bet because it's going to have the best noise cancellation, echo cancellation, and such. But if you want the best quality, so if you're bringing in a DJ, for example, don't touch Zoom because that's just going to ruin it. So yeah, I guess it depends on, if your source quality is high, you want a high quality audio, but if your source quality is low, then you probably want to start with Zoom so that Zoom can help you with that rather than having to do the processing on your end. Because, I mean, I'm sure they've done a lot of R&D to help that. So yeah, if that makes sense.
I think it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does, because it's not just about, like you said, it's not just about getting the absolute best quality coming back. Like we said earlier, picking a winner was basically not going to happen because all of the solutions had their weird quirks along the way, or use cases, or where they were not good. So you're absolutely right. If someone's on a laptop, the quality of the audio is already pretty bad. So maybe something like Zoom can do some work to lessen that load on people's ears. So that's a really good point, actually. We're already getting people coming in now with oh, and Hardy Media, thank you so much for the super chat. You gentlemen are great. Thank you so much for such helpful content. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, it's been I think we've packed in a lot of information into these few episodes, and I've been really happy with how they went. And it sounds like, Ryan, we have lots of ideas for a possible season 2. Ecamm, Jeremy says. And we also have Mikhail saying Zoom ISO. I think people are quite interested to hear more about that for sure.
Mm.
vMix Call, I would like to explore that too and just see how that stacks up against other options. I've used it very successfully in the past, and if you're using vMix, it works so well in as part of the software that it's hard not to use that whenever you use vmix. So you have to do a lot of work to use something else.
An interesting part on
Uh,
that. So I joined
mhm.
Petra on her channel, Tech Condo, and I came in on vmix call, and there was no way in the normal window to actually change my camera and microphone, because mine was popping up with NDI cam or something that was just happened to be the top of the list. And we ended up having to use the beta version for it to actually allow me to change. So I'm actually surprised how much people are getting good results out of that. The fact that you can't change the camera, because it's not abnormal for people to have maybe like a FaceTime camera and a webcam on top, and if you can't choose which one you want, that's a bit, and even a microphone, like you can't choose if you're using the AirPods or whatever. So it's a bit of a deal breaker for me at the moment in terms of not being able to adjust that on either end,
Yeah,
which is
and I think
interesting.
I thought that they maybe brought that out of beta, that advanced, because they were calling it the advanced version of contributing to vmix calls, where you could screen share
Mm.
and things like that. Is it the same one that you saw,
Yeah, because we went to the
Ryan?
beta which had the advanced option, but that was like 2 weeks
Right.
ago, I think, or 3 weeks ago. So,
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe by the time we
well, potentially
because
the software wasn't updated on Petra's end, potentially.
yeah, maybe. No,
So
no, I don't think it's a software. I think it is their service. So here's
interesting.
Duncan saying we use the advanced vmix links now. So it, but you're right. For years it's been the older one, and I've always found whenever I sent it to people, the older vmix links, that some of the buttons were just a little bit cryptic enough that you accidentally, if I remember correctly, you could accidentally hang up on the call thinking that you were going to do something else. Um, so it is really important what those buttons look like and if they're labeled well. And in that case, and it's the same for Video Ninja I'm looking at right now, it's just symbols. So therefore, until you hover over it, you don't exactly know what you're going to click on. You might accidentally mute yourself whenever you meant to do something else. So some of those things are really important to keep and make right for your average contributor. But I think we can explore that if we go to season 2 and talk about vmix call for sure. And I'm sure we'll have many other options along the way, as people suggest different contribution methods. And in fact, Ryan, you and I, we had a nice long list of things we wanted to cover. Season 2 potentially being like what we just talked about, and or even a season 2 or season 3 being more of the Restream Studio and
Mm.
StreamYard style solutions, because they're pretty good contributor experiences too, for the most part, right?
Yeah, 100%. And the fact that you don't need any hardware to do it as well is great. So the fact that you can wind it up anywhere on any device is, because yeah, when we did that the Blackmagic reaction video, I know you weren't a huge fan of that, but the fact that we did all that in a browser essentially, and the quality was pretty good. So yeah,
You're right.
definitely
You're
things to look
absolutely right.
into. Yeah.
And Rick, I was going to make this point earlier, but you've just reminded me, Rick. Idea for episode 2 or even a season. Like you could probably make a full season out of just Video Ninja and some of the settings that it has. I think we really found that whenever we were talking about it, Ryan, me, you, and Aaron. There was more. There was more things to discuss than we could possibly get to in one episode, and we were kind of
It's
looking
massive.
at the docs, and yeah, there's so many just weird little URL strings that you can put on there, right? And it does so much.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Actually, that would actually be interesting to even bring in Steve, and I don't even know if he knows what's there anymore, because there's so many different things now. But
It's grown beyond him, maybe.
exactly.
Um, so let me just make sure if there was any, because time disappears fast whenever
When you're having fun.
when you're having fun. I think I think one more rating that would be totally worth talking about would be this one, and it's something we found over the weekend on the show, was expandability of contributors. So in that case, what we thought was our show has 3 people, but what if you wanted to bring in 10 people? And or for example, and to our point a second ago, things like the Restream Studio, I'm not entirely sure what the limit is there, but getting more people on the stream is really simple to do. Just send a link to some more people. And video is like that, and Zoom is like that, where you can just, if somebody said yes 5 minutes before showtime, you could get them in the show in terms of the contribution side. But I think really it comes down to your end then on the hardware side, Ryan, about which of these methods would actually let you add somebody 5 minutes before showtime. Any of them stick out in your head as to like definitely not or definitely does?
I mean, on a hardware side, you are limited to how many ports you've got on your machine, unless you're happy to do a multi-box in one input. So Zoom can do like a gallery view, for example. Video can also do a gallery style view. Yeah, so when we're talking hardware, you really have to have those prepped in terms of spare inputs, and it's worth having a few spare inputs anyway if you lose a machine or do anything like that. But SRT and Streaming Bridge are harder because you physically need that box to do that. SRT, not so much in terms of software, because if you're running a software mixer, you can just keep receiving things until your internet dies, or your computer dies, either or. Yeah, so it really depends. If you want individual inputs, that gets fun. If you're happy with just a gallery wall and let the software choose, Zoom's an option, or video, because you can just keep bringing people in. Video, not so much with more people, because when you start sending between people, you start hitting limits in terms of that. But you can also turn off, you can put it in broadcast mode for video, so you can set everyone to only look at the director's feed. So they won't be sending to each other. They'll only be looking at you. So they're sending one feed, they're receiving one feed, but you're receiving 20 feeds. So
Yeah.
a few different options there.
Yeah, there are. That is a good point. And I think I've certainly used Zoom in the past for huge meetings. And then you kind of just use the gallery view sometimes, and you do some work, sort of clicking work, to get people pinned on that output that you have. So you can scale those up much easier than you could scale the SRT and the streaming bridge. I mean, you need a streaming bridge for every person, and if you only have one, you only have one. So you can't really deploy more unless you go out and buy them. But I think a lot of productions, you kind of know what you're going to, hopefully you know roughly how many people are going to show up before the production actually starts. You don't always though, right?
Yeah, no. It's actually, I was just looking at the poll that we put up. It was interesting to see that our video was leading initially, but now it's neck and neck with Zoom. 42% for Zoom video, and SRT and ATEM Stream are both 8%. So that's very interesting.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I just ended it there. Yeah, so you're right. 42 and 42. That's pretty interesting. Whenever we started, I wouldn't have been hugely surprised that Zoom was quite that high. But I am surprised SRT was quite that low, 7%. Yeah, really interesting. And Hardy just to threw in a question there that said, please restate the new Bird Dog device. What was that called again? The Bird Dog
Play, I think.
Play, yeah. And it's just like a little desktop, tiny little box to convert NDI. And if we get that, we can maybe make that part of the testing solution along the way. Well, I think that was a pretty nice wrap up, talking through each of the seasons, or each of the episodes, and exploring what we went through. And there's the Bird Dog Play as well over there.
Yep.
It's really hard to point the right way, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I guess I wanted to thank all the people who joined us each of the weeks. We had Petra on with Zoom on the first week. We had Jonas with the SRT. We had Aaron on the Video Ninja week. And then we had Alex as well on the ATEM Streaming Bridge week. And I think they all did excellent jobs coming in, chatting about the devices. And even if things were going great or not so great, we had some fun along the way. And of course, Ryan, I especially want to thank you for all of your hard work on your end, mixing, switching the show, making sure everything runs right, and of course, like we said, at a very interesting time of the day. Have you had fun? I hope you have.
I've had a lot of fun. It's been it's been a lot of early mornings, but yeah, I really enjoyed this. This is it's been fun to hang with you, John, and to hang with all of you fine folks in the Here's a Record YouTube channel. So thank you all for chatting. It's been a lot of fun actually doing this live and having that live feedback and being able to discuss with all you. So yeah, it's a bit sad that this season's over. I've been looking forward to my 3 a.m. mornings.
I know you're going to have to just, get some sleep. And so I think what me and Ryan decided, and you can check out Ryan's channel in the description below this video, of course, and follow along, and a lot of similar-ish content, or at least a nice little subscribe there. Very good. But what we decided was at least we would go away, not make any plans for season 2, other than we would love to do it. Go away, think about it, come up with a tactic, review how this one went, and just go from there, really. So, but it's been a pleasure. It's been fun to chat about all these solutions, and I think I'm pretty confident that we can make videos or more episodes live about the next evolution of devices, and maybe some cool new solutions will come out along the way before we get to that season.
I have no doubt. In this day and age, this is not going anywhere. So, yeah.
Always going to be too much to discuss, more than we can manage.
Exactly.
But yeah, thanks so much for watching along in the seasons, especially if you watched all the episodes along the way. If you do have any more questions about any of these contribution options, or you have ideas for the future, Discord is the best way to do that. If you're not already part of the Discord, you can do that in the video description below. And I guess we'll see you in the next live stream or the next season of Return Feed. So until then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you later.